Is that right? Yeah. You posted, we posted. I think building is volunteer.
Yeah, it's like, why you put something on the top? You're never gonna have somebody.
I hate to sit down here with you, and I had to sit up there because of the committee meeting. I'm anxious to hear what he says.
I don't
I guess you decided to know what
See, he's telling you one thing and me another, and he is not gonna tell it.
No, here in the back, right?
The mayor said that he's to reassign.
I'm good.
But we don't have to.
So I guess the green light. It has to be on the road.
I know. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Allegheny Regional Commission meeting for today, May 25th. Glad to see a good crowd turned out. And with that said, we'll ask the Executive Director to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Walters, can you hear us? We're going to mark him. Yeah, no, Mr. Walters of Allegheny is attending remotely today. Mr. Griffith? Mr. Clinton? Here. Mr. LaRue? Mr. Blade Martin? Mr. Collins? Mr. Spence? Mr. Carter? Mr. Gibson? Ms. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Whitlow? Here. Mr. Dean Martin? Here. Chair North?
Here.
Mr. Osborne?
Here.
Mr. Radford?
Here.
Mr. Dressler? Mayor Seibold? Mr. Vollison? Ms. Urban?
Here.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Here.
Ms. Dirk?
Present.
Mr. Wallace?
Present.
Ms. King?
Here.
Ms. Loudermilk?
Here.
Mr. Unruh will not be here today. His mother-in-law passed away this week, so he was not able to make it. Mr. Wood? Mr. Clements? Mayor Gross? Mr. Peters? We have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introductions for those folks around the table and those starting to my left. So I'm Phil North, Roanoke County.
I'm Steve Clinton, Boston County.
David Medford, Supervisor.
Debbie Loudermilk, Town of Clifton Forge.
Lori Smith, Supervisor, Franklin County.
Dean Martin, Roanoke County.
And our honored guest.
Elgin Samuel.
Thanks.
Chris Whitlow, Franklin County.
Stephanie Moon, Reynolds, City of Roanoke.
Lee Osborne, Citizen Representative, Roanoke County.
Barbara Dirk, representing the City of Roanoke.
Luke Purdy, I'm the alternate for the City of Roanoke.
Dawn Erdman, I'm a city rep for the City of Roanoke.
Dee King, City of Salem.
Jim Wallace, City of Salem.
Elizabeth Elmore, the Regional Commission.
Jeremy Holmes with Regional Commission.
Richard Taylor, Roanoke County Administrator.
Martha Hooker, Supervisor, Tapa District.
Madeline Septek, Assistant to the County Administrator, Roanoke County.
Good afternoon, Peter Luback, County Attorney for Roanoke County.
I'm Christy Wills, I'm the Communications Officer for the Roanoke City and Alleghany Health Districts.
Hi, I'm Bailey Helgeson. I'm the Peer Recovery Coordinator here at the Regional Commission. Robin Brunn, Regional Commission.
Gabriel Eager-Eye, Regional Commission.
Debbie Wells, the Regional Commission.
Amanda McGee with the Regional Commission.
Jonathan Stinson, with the Regional Commission.
Okay, with that said, we'll move on to action item 2 on the agenda. Approval of consent agenda items, approval of the agenda, approval of the minutes from April 27th meeting, on pages 3 through 16 of your packet, the financial reports ending April 30th, also found on pages 17 through 20 of your packet, and approval of the 2023 Community Development Block Grants priorities on page 21. Action requested is the approval of the consent agenda items with a voice vote. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Any noes? Okay, good. Chairman's remarks. Today we're live streaming our meeting on the Commission's Facebook page as part of our ongoing effort to improve public awareness of the important work undertaken by the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission. We want to remind everyone watching they're always welcome to address the Commission by one of the public hearings or in person during the public comment period at each meeting. I want to also thank everyone who came out for the 6-year improvement plan meeting hosted by VDOT and the Commonwealth Transportation Board in Salem earlier this month. Over 50 citizens, local elected officials, and locality staff had signed up to speak on issues ranging from I-81 to the Craig Botetourt Trail, taking the time to both thank CTB members for their support of our region's transportation needs and energetically advocating for the projects needed to meet those needs. It's critically important to secure important infrastructure investments in our community, and I might add that of the first 7 speakers that day, 6 of the 7 addressed I-81 as a large #1 concern. So as I've told folks, it's not going away. It's still going to be there the next time, so we need help with that. Beginning with our first meeting in September, we will have ongoing agenda items involving the Commission's various standing committees to report on their activities to our membership. The Commission's current standing committees are the Blue Ridge Advisory Committee, the SEDS Committee, which is the Comprehensive Economic Development Committee, and the Collectives Advisory Committee. Each of these committees does important work on behalf of the Commission and provides advice or makes decisions on how funds are spent across several programs, both internal and external to the Commission. We look forward to hearing regular, brief updates on their work in upcoming Commission meetings. Also, I believe we're going to have the Franklin County presentation in June.
In
June, and then followed by
Rocky Mount will be the final presentation, tentatively scheduled for September.
Right, we look forward to hearing from those folks about what's happening in their neck of the woods, if you will. Finally, a reminder that the nominating committee will be meeting shortly after today's commission meeting. If you're interested in serving as an officer in the upcoming commission term, please contact me or one of the nominating committee members, Mayor Gross, Mr. Billy Martin, Ms. Moon Reynolds, or Ms. Laurie Smith. Again, thank each of you for your service and for attending today. We'll move on now to item 4, Executive Director's Report. Jeremy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick things I want to note. We are almost at the end of National Bike Month. This is the annual event recognizing the importance of cycling to to our transportation and recreation options, especially here in the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany region. Regional Commission staff celebrated by participating in a number of events, including National Bike to Work Week, and 100% of our staff took and passed, importantly, the League of American Bicyclists bicycle-friendly driver test, which I encourage you, even if you're never going to ride a bicycle, that's a really interesting way to kind of test your own knowledge and ability to share the road with cyclists. So we all took it, we all passed it, I have the certificates to prove it. You may also have noticed commission staff wearing green ribbons this month. This is in recognition of Mental Health Awareness Month, bringing attention to the challenges that many of our friends and neighbors face navigating mental health issues. The Commission's work touches on several areas dealing with mental health, from the Roanoke Valley Collective Response Program, working to address the mental health challenges precipitated by the opioid crisis, to the many projects we undertake to improve access and the experience of the outdoors. And we understand that getting outside and getting in nature is actually an important strategy to address and improve mental health. So we're proud, along with many of our partners in the region, to support this effort and appreciate the leadership of the United Way of the Roanoke Valley in spearheading this campaign. And then finally, you might be aware and familiar with the Economic Development Administration's recently released notice of funding opportunity for the Tech Hub program. The Tech Hub program is part of the CHIPS Act effort to sort of reshore and rebuild American capacity to make, in this case, microprocessors, but broadly a number of technologies that are currently are largely made overseas. So the Tech Hub program seeks to invest in companies and communities investing in the technologies of the future, while diversifying the country's technology innovation centers outside of a handful of major urban areas in which they currently reside, which I think is Silicon Valley, New York, and I can't remember the third one, but basically everything is built there. In phase one of the program, a consortium of government, industry, and other partners can apply to receive strategy planning funding and or seek an EDA designation as a tech hub, which sets you up for receiving tens of millions of dollars in implementation funding in the future, but you need to have that designation first. So we are currently working with a number of stakeholders within and outside of the region on identifying a possible tech hub position for the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany region, with the hopes of making an application by the August 15th deadline. So we're very early in that discussion, what that looks like, and we will of course bring that project to this board for your consideration and endorsement before anything moves forward. But I just wanted to let some folks know that there is some discussion happening about what we would look like as a potential tech hub. So that is all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Item number 5 is legislative update and Catawba Hospital update for status. The Chair welcomes the Honorable Delegate Sam Rasul. Tell us everything, so Sam.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. From here?
Yes.
Is this good?
Or you can go stand up after you want to, where the microphone is there.
Whatever works best.
That might work best for you.
These new owl monitors are kind of spooky.
So this is collecting artificial intelligence.
Well, it's watching. I think I might be at the end right here. It's always watching me, and so I have to make sure I know what I'm doing. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you all, to be with this esteemed group. Look, just kind of, before I dive into this, what's kind of made it possible for us to even get to this point. What we're generally known for, we actually go way back. There are a lot of connections here. Billy used to deliver my mail, and it was always on time in Blue Ridge, and we got a lot of connections here for sure. But let me not digress and waste your time. But what's really helped us as population has shifted in Virginia, population growth has shifted away from the region. What's helped us is to try to really figure out how we can work, especially across partisan lines and regional lines, to get some things done. And I will tell you, you all know Virginia, it's a 50-50 state. And in our neck of the woods, it's largely dominated by one political demographic. And so in Northern Virginia and the Urban Crescent, we know it's largely another political demographic. And so when we can come in as a region and really try to work together to get some good projects done, and to show that we're working together as a region, that is so critically important because we have a step above. I mean, I'm watching it day in and day out where other localities, neighboring localities are constantly bickering and fighting with one another. It might be that they're, you know, mainly Republican or mainly Democrats or whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. The local government is hard, and those that can work together always have a step up in all of this. You all should take great pride and do everything that you can to protect that. When you go home and you're watching Fox News or MSNBC and you can eat your popcorn and enjoy what's happening in Washington, D.C. or some other places, that's fine, and root for Team Red, Team Blue. But when it comes to the region, if we can do everything that we can to really support and advance leaders and ideas that are really bringing us together as a unit, because we know how politics really works, right? It's find something that is very divisive, focus all of our energy on this, and then, you know, tell why the other side is gonna destroy the world and destroy America. What we've been able to do here in the Roanoke Valley is build a brand in Richmond that has been largely immune to that. We've been able to show people we work together. And really, we have to do that because we just don't have the political numbers that we used to since the population has shifted. So I really value the work that the Regional Commission does because you all are really the beginning of that conversation. And even in some of these conversations we've talked about this PDC working together with the New River Valley and some others to get things done. And that's I tell you, really moves the needle along in Richmond. Fast forward to the Catawba project. Many of you know years ago, quite frankly, under the McAuliffe administration, they tried to shut down Catawba altogether. And there was a bipartisan group of legislators. There were lots of folks here locally that pushed back and said, we need this resource here in our region. It's several hundred acres that are state-owned, that also employs several hundred people. That's critical to our system in having this acute care psychiatric hospital here in the region. And we certainly did not want to lose that. We were successful in pushing back against that push by the administration to shut it down. A few years later, we were actually successful in securing a small amount of money to do some renovations to bring the building up to par. And now we're on a whole nother level, talking about how can we synergize and think about some of the problems that we have in a completely different way. And so what we did was we had a study that was done last year, fairly involved, an extensive study. They used IBM Watson, they used all kinds of information to really hone in and figure out what can we do here to make best use of this campus, specifically with regards to mental health and substance use disorder. And what the data ended up telling us was that our need was for residential treatment. So what do we have here on the campus right now? On the campus right now it's a hospital like Carilion or HCA, but it has a specialty, and that is acute psychiatric care. And so people come there to have a hospital stay for a limited amount of time and are supposed to cycle back out into the community. What the study showed is that we're missing the kind of continuum of care, right? So we have preventative wellness programs with regards to substance use disorder, all the way to, and you'll see in a moment, all the way to the acute care. But what's in the middle are things like residential treatment. Can someone go and get residential treatment for 30 to 90 days so that way they can wane themselves off successfully? All the data showed while we need a few more acute beds, what we really need are the programs in the middle, most importantly. So That data was interesting, and it said that half of the people that are in Catawba now, and in the 3 state hospitals in the western part of Virginia, one in Standen, deep southwest, and Catawba, about half of them already have a substance use disorder, in addition to their other acute psychiatric issue. And that there was going to be a 37% increase for need in the region, while Virginia was only going to have a 3% rise with regards to substance use disorder. So it's going to get, over the next decade, profoundly worse as far as the amount of resources and need that is out there. So at the bottom, it showed through 2030 what we needed. And many of you have seen some of this data. We were recently ranked, well, it's not just a ranking, this is a dashboard that you can go and see real time. And there's lots of data out there, and so no need to be alarmist about one piece, but this was one that came to my attention just a few weeks ago that showed that Roanoke City, which is reflective of the Valley in many ways, Roanoke City is the second worst in America as far as non-fatal opioid overdoses with this metric. So what we need is about, what the study showed was, here's 3 different plans that you all can do. And it really is one plan, but you know how it is when you're building. You can do, you want to do platinum, gold, or silver. And I said, we'll be happy with silver if you can just bring that our way. And that is roughly about a $150 million plan to do a renovation of 2 large buildings there, and then to build 2 other buildings. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that. And so here we've got these 2 buildings in gray. These 2 big buildings. This is the existing hospital that you always see pictures of. There's a back hospital, a back building there as well. Because this is residential treatment, what the proposal is to take 2 of the floors there at Catawba and transform that into residential treatment. Now here's the key. Catawba Hospital is made for 240 patients, but it's only funded at 110. So it has a lot of excess capacity. And one of the floors is not even used at all. So the thought was, hey, why don't we take 2 of the floors and renovate those to be residential treatment? But because they're residents and not patients, this renovation to this back building is where they'll actually have all the programming. So they'll sleep here at night, and then you have programming over the course of the, let's say, 90 days that someone might be in a residential treatment program. So there'll roughly be about 48 residential treatment beds, and then 16 or so what they call detox beds that would be on those 2 floors right here. And then these would be the 2 new buildings. The 2 new buildings, this would be acute behavioral expansion. So what Catawba does today, just into a new building, because Catawba has another specialty, which is acute psychiatric geriatric care. Half of the patients there are geriatric patients that have an acute psychiatric issue. And this building is not made to care for our geriatric population. So the thought is that as we proceed, shift a lot of these, if not all of them, eventually into a new building that makes sense, and then transition this older building into all of, for it to be completely residential treatment as time progresses. And then this would be a building that did 3 major things. Outpatient services, that makes sense here, because some of that doesn't make sense here. Some of it makes sense to happen, of course, here in Roanoke and not in Catawba. You'd have behavioral health workforce programs, because we have a severe shortage with regards to behavioral health. And then the third component here is trying to do some of the research and development, like partnering with the Frail and Biomedical Research Institute, and you could have that research and development coming out of here. So what I have outlined here, to me, made a lot of sense when the firm presented it to us as a result of the study. But interestingly, what they said is, there's nothing like this in the whole country. There's nobody that has this kind of campus in the whole country, and this will be a first of its kind. That's why, generally speaking, the administration, Governor Youngkin's administration, Secretary Littell, Commissioner Smith, have all been very supportive and very interested in trying to do what they can to support this idea in moving forward. We've been able to really work on a bipartisan basis to continue to build on this. So years ago, I'm like, why isn't anybody doing this? Quite frankly, I was frustrated that we have so much talent, so many resources, so many great people who are doing good work here, and we weren't able to move the ball forward. So this little delegate out of Roanoke goes there, we got this little study, produced this, and then this year, we were fortunate enough to get the funding approved in the House to renovate these two buildings as the first step, to actually begin the residential treatment. And so we get the first tranche of funding for the renovation there in the House budget. We feel relatively good about all the signals we have from the Senate. As you know, we're in final budget negotiations, but the key senators who are involved, Senator Barker, Senator Deeds, Senator Newman, Senator Hanger, all who play in the behavioral health space have all expressed support for this. So we feel pretty good as to where we're at right now. Here's a couple of renderings of one of the new buildings. Here's one of the other buildings as well. I've explained a little bit about what it might look like, a floor and a half of traditional residential treatment and half a floor of what they call detox treatment. And so this is what the General Assembly approved. And there's a lot more information, but let me see. This is what we actually technically approved in the budget. So that's the money, always a good thing, of about $15 million. And then this is a highlight of a presentation that I give to folks, and I brag about the regional collaboration. Oh, good, we got the Regional Commission on here. I'm glad I've got the logo down here. That's important to pander to you today. But I brag about this because several of the localities that are represented in this room, when Phil North, who has been fantastic to work with, and others who have called and said, we need you to send a letter of support, not just saying you support a project coming our way, which is kind of the easy thing to do, but we need you to say the opioid abatement dollars that are coming your way as a result of the lawsuits, will you commit a portion of that to some of the services and work that we're going to be doing at Catawba? And many of these localities involved here have openly said, yes, in a letter, we will commit some of that funding for this project. So it showed, while collectively, actually, it's not a lot of money in the scope of this project, because this is a $150 million project that we're not going to get, certainly that done overnight. It showed that we have skin in the game, and that's really important as we move forward. So wanted to just take a few minutes to touch on a lot of the highlights. There are a lot of other moving parts, but Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any questions that your commission members may have.
Thank you, Sam. So the $14.7 million is probably 99% sure it's going to pass and be effective July 1 for engineering and planning.
Well, it's 14.8 plus. You already took 100. I don't know what you did with it, but
We have to take
I probably can't ever say something like 99% plus, but certain. But I will say we're very fortunate that we have everyone on the same page. Not all the legislators understood what we were doing here. It took us a lot of time. Some people thought we were taking the hospital and shutting it down. Some people thought we were taking the hospital and expanding it into doing more of the same of what we are doing. We had to work with HCA and Carillion to ensure everyone feels good here, and fortunately, we were able to bring everybody to the table. We have many, many more steps to go, because this is just the first 15 million on the first part of the project, but it's gonna take a regional collaboration, and we continue to boast that we're not only gonna be first in the nation doing a project like this, but certainly, first in Virginia puts us as a front runner for battling for resources.
And so this is just really basically step one. We'll have to go back in future budget years and request the additional funds to keep advancing the project through stages 2 and 3.
Absolutely, yes. So there'll be exactly like that. And I do need to say, my friends, Delegate Austin, who's Vice Chair of Appropriations, that's always helpful in projects. If you've got somebody who's Chair or Vice Chair of Appropriations, Delegate McNamara, there have been folks who have been very, very supportive. The whole regional delegation has been supportive. I don't leave out anybody, but they've been very involved. And then Phil has, literally said, you just tell me when to show up, and I could call him. I did not do this, but I could call him the night before, and he'd be like, "I'll be down there," and it's just been fantastic to work with.
When the elevator door opens in Richmond, and you're on the elevator, and you look out and you see Sam Rasul, and he said, "Hey, I need to talk to you."
Yeah.
You usually get off that floor, whether you were getting off that floor or not, but it kind of happened like that, although it was coming out of a committee room, and I walked towards one of the judges from Salem, and you walked out and said, "Hey, I need to talk to you." So things kind of fell together for that first comment period before the Rules Committee. And I think we also did one via Zoom as well for the Senate Committee. So, yeah, this is step one, and you got the backing of many people in this room and all those that you gave thanks to for the regional contribution of support letters. So with that said, I think there's been some things that have happened since we had a meeting at Green Ridge with folks that represented the municipalities in this room and the counties, towns, and cities. And some of those folks, I think, have been working together, and there's been discussions with Mr. McDowell, who I think is the OAA Executive Director. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And so I think it'd be good right now if, I look to Madeline because she's done a lot of work on this, and Peter, what's the latest from Roanoke County involving this effort that you'd like to just comment on to substantiate what Sam is telling us?
Sure. So after the meeting that we had at Green Ridge, we put our heads together and looked into what we could apply for the first grant application of the OAA funding. That deadline was on May 5th. And so we talked to Mr. McDowell via Zoom, Peter and I both did, asked a few questions and got some clarification on what was needed to submit a grant application. What is needed is a direct ask, a direct identification on how money is going to be used. We must say a program or a specific building or a planning grant, for example. So at that juncture, that was probably early to mid-April that we had that conversation. We went back to the drawing board and we worked with the regional commission and Mr. Knapp, who is the director of the collective response. I want to make sure I get his title correct.
He is currently on the phone with Tony McDowell.
Yes,
with OAA,
yes.
so that's why he's not
We
here.
had been working, and as a region, specifically the city of Roanoke and the county of Roanoke, we put together a joint application to support the collective response. And with that application came supportive letters from the county of Franklin, the county of Botetourt, town of Vinton, I believe Covington, and also Rocky Mount. I could be, but it was a regional approach that we took. I touched base with Mr. Nat as I walked into the building, and he let me know, just like Jeremy said, they're on the phone right now with Tony McDowell, and they're asking for clarification questions. So it looks good. We're hopeful to have some information if we had received money by June.
The grant announcement is June 9th.
June 9th. So that is where we're at the moment. The good thing is we have the foundation to work as a region, and we are ready whenever we identify the next program or opportunity to apply for grants. The second grant window for the OAA funding is going to open fall of this year, October 1st.
Thank you for that update, and, you know, we made this part of Roanoke County's legislative agenda. We were just talking about the commission's legislative agenda earlier before the 3 o'clock meeting. So, we're headed in the right direction, Delegate Rasul.
That's right, yeah, I think so, and I know there are a lot of moving parts, and the state is who we're asking to help for the capital money, and then programming money to actually run the residential treatment. We would likely, the state would probably set a request for proposals for a private entity, so there'd probably be a public-private partnership to do the residential treatment. And then there'll be lots of other services that'll be wrapped around, and what they're discussing is the opioid abatement dollars, which are in 4 buckets that we won't fully get into today. But part of that is setting the tone and formally having a first application to show that by the time we've got this thing up and running, which, you know, renovations would take, 18 to 24 months, for example. By the time we've got this up and running, we've had a track record of success, applying for grants, working together from the OAA, so it should be good. We have a step ahead of everyone, and hopefully this will be kind of a shining light for lots of folks across the Commonwealth.
That's correct, and I just want to mention that we've got to keep building on this energy going forward. It's just like smart scale applications. You got to have leverage, and the leverage is the support, but also the dollars from these OAA grants that can be used to demonstrate to the Commonwealth, especially appropriations in the House and Senate. And by the way, don't be shy and modest. You're a member of appropriations, so you and Delegate Austin work very carefully on the money committee that provides these funds for consideration. And so, just to let all you on this room know, Sam is connected to where the money is. We just have to make sure we stay connected to his efforts and the OAA's efforts, but regionally.
I'm on the bottom of the list, and Terry is a second from the top. So I just want to put it in perspective. But thank you for that.
You won't be on the bottom much longer, because you have 2 years instead of 1. Over here, Peter has some
I just
comment.
have
Peter Lubeck.
one quick comment to make. Madeline did a great job of summarizing what the status is with regards to receiving funds through the Opioid Abatement Authority. I would also just like to note that there are also the direct distributions that we receive, not through the Opioid Abatement Authority, but directly. So there are, substantial funds that localities have received. We don't have to spend those immediately. We can put those aside and just wait until we get the word from Delegate Rasul that he's ready for the funds, he's ready for us to jump in the game and play. And I understand from our Board of Supervisors that that's something that we like to do, is put those funds aside, hold them, have our jerseys on, and when the coach calls us, we're ready to go.
That's exactly right.
He'll call you.
The opioid abatement, it's $1 billion. And it'll be, let's just say, 3 buckets. One bucket is money's coming straight to localities. Nobody touches it. Locality can choose what it wants to do within reason around opioid abatement. And that's what he's referring to is Roanoke County and some others have made the choice, we're gonna put this money away so it can be used to leverage for a lot more money later on. The second bucket is localities can work together. They have to work together because not one locality can apply, can work together to apply for the second bucket of money for programs, and that's what's happening here. And then the third bucket is agencies get money. So then we can go to the Department of Behavioral Health and say, we would like for you to put more money through the department, opioid abatement dollars, into Catawba. And the department will apply to the authority to ask for that money. And that'll take an enormous amount of coordination and a lot of politicking to get done. But that's what we're working on.
Yeah. And Barbara, you had a question?
Yeah, whenever you build something, you need to have a strong foundation. And when I'm out there at Catawba, there's no Wi-Fi. So is there plans for broadband to be? I believe there is.
So the 4-year plan in Virginia, which started at the end of the North administration, fortunately we had a bunch of money from the federal government, and we've been actually struggling to find enough procurers out there to actually put it in the ground as a Commonwealth. And so there, you will have an excellent representative and Martha, who's fighting hard. And so that'll be part of what's coming out into almost every nook. I think that the goal is 97% of Virginia by the end of the 4 years, and maybe we're in year 2.
So I believe that Catawba Hospital already had it even before this conundrum of trying to get it all out to all the places. They were actually way ahead.
Yeah, that's great.
The other thing that.
Thank you for Martha Martha's been, because it's in her district, been really a godsend and very, very helpful in all of this. And so we appreciate her strong advocacy in all of it.
And the other is localities that were listed as part of your team are from the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission.
That's right.
Is there anyone from Montgomery County, Craig County that are working with you to make this reality happen?
So fortunately, 2 months ago, we had a commission meeting, around 2 months ago, where that specifically came up. I believe that staff, and maybe Jeremy can comment, was gonna intentionally do some outreach to the PDC and the New River Valley as well.
Yeah, the request, Delegate Austin mentioned that what we'd like to do is look at a 60-mile radius of Catawba and see what regions that touches on, which is New River, Central Shenandoah, West Piedmont, Lynchburg. So it's all of our neighbors. And so I have reached out and have started conversations with each of those planning districts. The big challenges were just in that first OAA grant, and everyone, frankly, I'll brag on our collective response team. The Roanoke Valley was much farther ahead than the rest of the state in terms of being able to marshal project ideas and be prepared to work with the OAA on that funding. A lot of our neighbors were really focused on what do we do, how do we, what kind of programs do we want. So they were working on that, and we'll be able to reinvest some of that energy into how we all work together on the Catawba issue now that we've gotten to this first round of the grant funding, which will no doubt, the collective response will be a big convener on the various players in those regions to building services in Catawba.
Well, and I will say, from a GA perspective, Delegate Ballard in the New River Valley has been a big supporter. Senator Hackworth, of course, Senator Edwards, who represents both sides, has been a good supporter. So we've had some great bipartisan support from the New River Valley as well.
Yeah.
There is definitely a need for this. There's also the mental health issue. And I know Marion and St. Albans and some of these other hospitals don't have beds either. So that's, as we go forward with this, we just need to remember that there's still that need for mental health.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Barbara. I think Billy Martin, you had a question.
I was just curious on something. You mentioned there's quite a few geriatric patients in there. Were they in there for a substance abuse or other problems? Do you know?
Yeah,
just curious.
Usually, because they have a specialty, usually your primary diagnosis is not going to be a substance use disorder acute diagnosis. You'll have some other kind of acute diagnosis a psychiatric diagnosis that you will have. But we all know that people have these interrelated diagnoses, and the comorbidity here just so happens that, roughly half of them also have an addiction that they're working through, for sure. So they have some other issue. Usually, you have to have some other psychiatric diagnosis, acute psychiatric diagnosis, and it just so happens you also have a substance use disorder, which obviously clearly is not going to be helping your situation.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anyone else have any more questions before we go on to a couple more folks for Delegate Rasul? Okay, just want to recognize Chairman Hooker from Roanoke County. She's not only in her district, but she's been very supportive and participating in some of the focus groups last year that led us to where we are today. And so she's always open for questions and support and guidance along with our staff. And so we appreciate your efforts as well. Just be careful when you're in Richmond on the elevator, it opens up, and Sam's standing there, you gotta get off.
I'm gonna put you to work.
Yeah, I'll put you to work. And Sam, I just want to recognize someone who just showed up after he got off the phone with the governor, the executive director, McDowell, and that's Robert Nat. Robert, would you introduce yourself to everyone that's here, and tell us what, if anything, you can tell us? And if you can't, well, just say a few words.
Sure. My name is Robert Nat. I work here at the Commission and serve as the Director of the Roanoke Valley Collective Response. Very excited about this project and have worked with Delegate Rizul on this for a year and a half, feels like. Sorry I'm late. I was on a call with the Opioid Abatement Authority about a grant application we submitted. They hope to decide about 2 weeks, so we're fairly close to that, but working through a couple questions they had and all good indications at this point.
Sounds positive. Appreciate your participation and sharing that note with us.
We would have never have gotten the study funded had it not been for the collective response, which started in 2018. So 5 years ago, the collective response, 50 plus organizations at that point, now it's over 100, I think, came together in a put together for 2 years a plan. And I got to take the 76-page plan around the General Assembly and say, we've got our act together. Sometimes you fake it till you make it. We've got our act together. And we need to take a good look at this. So thank you to the collective response who's been a beacon. And that's been, everyone, law enforcement, et cetera, coming to the table, trying to find the right solutions.
And just on behalf of the commission, I want to thank you for your proactive representation of something important to this region and to the state in the General Assembly. Because I know you've worked a lot of hours and expended a lot of energy to get us to where we are today. So we look for you to continue to carry that banner down there and move up on the Appropriations Committee and get some more money for the area.
Yeah.
Oh, if you need help, all you gotta do is call anybody in this room,
Well, I'll just text you, Phil. You can come wrangle some folks for us, for sure. Well, thank you for your generous time and for all that you do, and please know just how important your specific role is as a regional commission. And I know you don't take it lightly, but I probably don't hear enough thanks from people like me. We really appreciate it, because when we're working on one accord, it makes things a whole lot easier for sure. So
thank you
so
very much,
for having me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Delegate Rizul. That's all good. Good report. Don't nobody leave. We got a great speaker coming up next on item 6 of the agenda, the state of the economy. The chair is going to welcome Sonia Waddell of the Richmond Federal Reserve. And Jeremy, do you have anything to lead in on that?
Well, we're excited to have Ms. Waddell here to kind of give us instead of state of the economy, let us know where we are. We're talking about appropriations in the General Assembly, and give us a picture of kind of what we're looking at. And Ms. Waddell, if you'd like to offer any introduction yourself, you're welcome to, but we're happy to jump right into the information.
And before you start there, Sonia, is, we all in this room want to know what our stocks are doing today with all this debt service discussion in Washington. Do we need to get up and run and call our brokers and tell them to sell or to hold?
No comment.
That's probably what I thought you'd say.
So yeah, unfortunately, I had blocked from 3 to 4 on my schedule. So I had something at 4 o'clock. I've told them I'll be a little bit late, but I'm probably going to skip through some of these slides. Happy to come back, happy to continue the conversation. But the questions that I was going to center this presentation around are sort of what we know about current economic activity. And I'm assuming somebody would shout out if you couldn't hear my slides, see my slides. But so what do we know about current economic activity? What might we know about the future? Where are we on inflation? So I will say that, I've been at the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond since January of 2008. So I started 2 months before Bear Stearns collapsed. So I've never known uninteresting economic times at the Fed, that's for sure. But there were years there where I didn't even talk about inflation in my presentation. So I could read between 1.5% and 2%. But obviously that is an important topic right now. And then what do we know about labor market conditions, including in Virginia? And, I'm going to present a lot of aggregate data and then make an argument that aggregate data in the end is not always the most useful way to look at the world, as the conversations that I've been hearing about what's happening in the Valley and particularly in the Roanoke region. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. What I'll do is I'll talk about the work that we do at the Richmond Fed, and like I said, I'll sort of provide an overview of that as well. And if there are further conversations to be had, I'm of course happy to come back and happy to go there in person. I've actually we couldn't get the schedules to work out, but I do end up in Roanoke not too infrequently, as do my colleagues. Okay, so let me just start with this broad picture of the U.S. economy. This is gross domestic product. It's the broadest measure that we have of economic activity. The white lines through the chart are not actually a typo. It is the only way that we can see movements after the pandemic. So the pandemic economic activity shifted in such a dramatic way that if we did not sort of cut off that middle part of the axis, we would not only lose what's happened recently, we basically lose the Great Recession. So in order to kind of see recent movements, we do that. I want to point out a couple of things because I think this matters for how we think about the U.S. economy right now and our regional economy as well, which is that in the first quarter, total GDP growth was 1.1%. This is a deceleration from the 2.6% in the fourth quarter. You can see the red dots there are the median projection of the FOMC, so the Federal Market Open Market Committee participants, for where GDP growth will be in 2023, 2024, and 2025, and then sort of the long run. And so you can see that they're sort of at 0.2% for 2023, 1.4 for 2024, and then sort of getting back to 2% growth. These projections were made in June. They'll be making some more in 2 weeks when they need to, 3 weeks when they meet again. But what I want to point out is that you see some volatility, right? So if you look at 2022, you see 2 quarters of decline, and then you see 2 quarters of expansion, and then you see sort of slower growth in the first quarter of 2023. A lot of this is movements in inventories. So actually, if you look at underlying domestic demand, particularly consumer demand, you see strength in some of the declining quarters that exceeds the growth in some of the expanding quarters. So actually, the 3.7% growth in consumption spending in the U.S. that we saw in the first quarter was stronger than what we saw in the fourth quarter. And I point that out because these headline numbers, there are sort of underlying some things that don't necessarily indicate or where we are in the economy. So again, sort of we saw this decline in inventory investment and a deceleration in net exports that really brought down that growth in the first quarter of 2023. On the other hand, we've also seen a contraction in investment. So residential investment has been contracting for quite a few quarters, but business investment has also started to contract somewhat, and particularly investment in equipment. So let me skip, let me skip this to move to here. So it kind of leads, I know we've been talking about this sort of recession and I'm again happy to take questions or the potential of a recession. So far, big picture, the overall numbers are sort of indicating that if we're going to see a recession, it's going to be business-led and not consumer-led. So that GDP number and what underlines it is one indication of that. So this here is a measure that we do at the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. It actually includes a lot of Virginia. So it's a lot of Virginia and a lot of North Carolina firms, but we also, of course, have our entire district represented. So we also have South Carolina, Maryland, DC, and West Virginia. But so we survey manufacturers and service providers monthly. It's a diffusion index, the light blue. So, they both are, but the light blue is the one that we do here. Anything above 0 indicates expansion. Anything below 0 indicates contraction. And this is also a composite of this particular measure is a composite of shipments, new orders, and employment. And I'll say that a lot of this has been below 0 for quite a few months. We saw these record high numbers in 2021 and 2022, and now we're seeing sort of this kind of continued sort of slowness. This is a measure of change, not level. It's the share of people who said that things got better from last month minus the share who said that things got worse. So we do hear firms, a fair number of firms, saying they're still seeing demand that is stronger than last, so that is weaker than last year, but it's still stronger than what it was in 2019. So I don't want to overplay this, but we are seeing some slowdown in manufacturing, but it's also really mixed. So, for example, we had a North Carolina furniture manufacturer in this most recent survey who said, for the second time in 42 years, we've been forced to lay off employees. Our total workforce has been reduced by more than 30% through attrition and layoffs, and we don't anticipate business conditions to improve in the foreseeable future. On the other hand, we have a completely different comment from a fiber manufacturer in South Carolina who said, our business has been very strong for the past 5 years, and we expect it to grow even more in the next 2 years. Our raw materials are much easier to get these days and at much more stable pricing. We are very positive about the economic future. And in fact, within our comments, we'll get, within product, like among product lines, right? So maybe a consumer product is doing well and industrial focused products are not, or vice versa. So there's just a lot of diversity. So this is a similar measure that we do for the service sector. Again, that's right. We've been sort of below zero for a few months. A lot of this is sort of driven by revenues or by demand. Now, this is a little bit harder to interpret as a headline number because we include construction and real estate and hotels, and leisure and hospitality and retail. And so we have some divergent experiences by industry for sure. We still hear from hotels and sort of leisure and hospitality that business is good, but of course it's up over where they were at in sort of 2021 and 2022. So again, sort of some slowness in business. I'm gonna skip this. So I talked about residential investment being sort of slow. Some people have even talked about sort of a recession in residential investment. Housing starts and permitting, the construction activity has just, I put in these two slides, the 1990s averages, because even if we don't want to get back to where we were in 2005, we might think that the 1990s is a good benchmark for where we want to be in residential construction or sort of home sales, and we're below that mark certainly in construction and in new home sales. But I don't want to belabor that. I do want to talk about this chart because this is something that we've been spending some time on at the Richmond Fed. It's something that I'm sure you all are facing in your communities as much as we are everywhere in the country, which is just this increase in the price of housing, right? So part of this, of course, has to do with the inventory, with the construction that we just have not seen since the Great Recession. Most of our communities are struggling with inventory, and that problem just kind of exacerbated in 2021 and 2022. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of metro versus non-metro areas in Virginia. But I wanted to point out that this increase in house prices, as you all know, I'm sure, is not unique to the largest cities, right? We really have seen house price increases falling recently, but still, this chart is year-over-year percent growth, right? So we're still seeing, and this is conforming conventional loans and it's repeat home sales, right? So this is probably arguably, where we're going to see the most muted increase in house prices. And we've seen these really strong house price increases. Okay, so I want to move on. Why have we seen this strength in the consumer sector, sort of a resilient consumer sector? And again, like I said, you can have these slides, and I'm happy to sort of talk about any of them later. But the prior slide is sort of about the resilient consumer sector, and we do have a resilient consumer sector. And it's this, right? So this is payroll employment growth. It's monthly growth. It's averaged over a quarter. So we added, the 472,000 jobs in January, 248,000 in February, 165,000 in March. So those are average to the first quarter number. And then we added another 253,000 jobs in April. I will be providing a pop quiz so that y'all can remember every single one of those numbers. But my point there is that they're all above 200,000. So if we think about where we were prior to the Great Recession, what did we think of as a good jobs report? Oh, it was above 200,000 jobs in a month, and we have well exceeded that month after month. Are there some emerging signs of softening? Maybe, right? So a couple, and there are a couple in each of these labor market slides, right? So one is that, the pace of job growth, as you can see from this slide, has been slowing somewhat. April wasn't slow, but it has been overall slowing somewhat. In a lot of the more recent months, the job gains have been concentrated in a few services industries like healthcare, leisure, hospitality. Employment in sectors like manufacturing or construction is sort of flat. Another is that the private work week is on a declining trend. So as the labor market loosens a little bit, maybe you don't have fewer jobs, but maybe the jobs that you have fewer hours, right? So that's the sort of declining, and average hourly earnings growth. So wage growth is down from where it was. Again, like some of this is just moving from a red hot labor market nationally to a hot labor market. But there are sort of emerging signs, and I'll say, like, I'm probably not going to talk about the unemployment slide too much, but unemployment claims have been coming up a little bit. Job postings have been coming down a little bit. So there are, again, some indications. So what about Virginia? So this is employment index to 100 in February of 2020. So to the extent that we're back above that horizontal line, we have regained the losses of the recession. The U.S. passed its pre-COVID employment level in the summer of 2022. In Virginia, it was more like the fall of 2022. Now in Virginia, we're about 1.2% above our pre-COVID employment level. This is solid growth. We've seen this kind of, growth in Virginia, compared to North Carolina, we're way below North Carolina in terms of growth. So North Carolina exceeded its pre-COVID employment in the fall of 2021, so a year before Virginia, and is now almost 6% above pre-COVID employment. North Carolina is also one of the stronger growing states in the US, actually. But I talk about North Carolina or the US, the broad industry trends tend to be similar, not universally similar, but the idea that, like, the industries that have regained the losses, right? So this is February 2020 to April 2023. So in retail trade in Virginia, we are still 15,000 jobs below where we were pre-COVID. Leisure and hospitality is about 10,000 jobs. So the idea that those three, government is below, those three industries being sort of below or or only slightly above their pre-COVID level is pretty consistent across all of our states. Just like the growth in professional business services and particularly in transportation and warehousing, that growth has been just sort of phenomenal, actually, in the last couple of years, right? So it looks like, of course, in Virginia, it looks like, that PBS industry is growing faster, but it's a much larger share of the Virginia economy. So employment in transportation, warehousing, and utilities is actually 12% above its pre-COVID level, compared to 4.5% for professional business services. So we found that, like, actually the regions of Virginia that have been growing a lot in this sector, have been some of the faster growing areas. Like, for example, Lynchburg has really not seen growth in transportation and warehousing, and they've also sort of been one of the slower growing or declining metro areas. So this is actually this is the employment change, specifically from February of 2020 to April of 2023 for our metro areas. In terms of driving employment growth, so Winchester has been one of the faster growing metro areas for a while in Virginia. It is less than 2% of employment in Virginia. So as a driver of Virginia growth, it's not a huge contributor. Blacksburg and Blacksburg also is about 2% of employment in Virginia. But Blacksburg and Richmond's about 17%. They've been growing, they've been picking up really since COVID in terms of growth. They were kind of much slower before COVID, and since COVID, they've been picking up. Now, that Northern Virginia is 38% of employment in Virginia. So in some ways, so goes Northern Virginia, so goes the state, not entirely, but that we often do see that. And Northern Virginia has been sort of underperforming as a growth, as like spurring the growth of Virginia. It's not been doing that in the way that it did, say, in the 90s or the early 2000s. And then Virginia Beach is kind of slow growing pre-COVID, and now it's really been growing quite slowly. This is actually one of my favorite charts. I'm gonna skip this one sort of, but I'll point out that first of all, this big green bubble in the middle, that's Northern Virginia. So the bubble sizes are the size of employment, and the x-axis is year-over-year growth. The y-axis, the horizontal axis is year-over-year growth. The vertical axis is 10-year growth. So this is kind of a measure of momentum. And what I like about this chart, and I like it for our whole district, because if you add in South Carolina and Maryland, it just gets even more stark, that the southern part of our district has seen these metro areas that are just driving growth in those states, that we have not seen in Virginia, we've not seen in Maryland, and West Virginia sort of does its own thing. So I'm not, again, I want to leave time for at least a couple of questions. But one of the things that we've been trying to do for the last few years is really understand better the dynamics outside of the metro areas in our states, right? In all of our states, including in Virginia. So, so we kind of, everyone's, you talk rural, urban. It's very hard to characterize rural versus urban. This is an art, not a science. It's not even an art, because I think you really have to go to an area to understand it and understand the community in the area and let communities sort of define themselves. But we have to look at data somehow. So one of the things that we did was we took the RUCC codes, which is the USDA code. So that's the top left chart there. And we characterized basically any RUCC code of 3 or higher, so 3 to 9 as rural, kind of rural / small town. Right. So, in Virginia, then rural is going to include counties in metro, well, actually anywhere. So rural is going to include counties in metro areas with fewer than 250,000 people, or in counties that are not in metro areas. So in Virginia, we're talking about Charlottesville, Blacksburg, Harrisonburg, Winchester, Stanton, Danville, Martinsville. All of these places are sort of rural. And in fact, the only urban places, Roanoke is one. Lynchburg is one, Richmond, Virginia, of course, DC, and Kingsport, Bristol. So that's the top left map here. The bottom one is sort of how we define rural and urban. And then the top right is just to point out, that's a continuous measure of rurality, an index of rurality. It's done out of Purdue University. They have they include size, density, remoteness. Now, one thing that is very interesting in Virginia, if you use something like that, is that because of the way we have our independent cities, we end up with these sort of urban areas that would be classified as rural areas, and if you're defining it based on metro areas. But anyway, so that's kind of a dynamic that we have in Virginia. But I do all of this, I gave all of this setup because of something like this, right? So when I was showing employment and employment growth, and the unemployment rate in Virginia is pretty low. Of course, this varies a lot by region. And in general, there's a negative relationship between the rurality of counties and employment, which is sort of why we started thinking about this. This chart is actually sort of why we started thinking about this in this way. And how do we get at this at the Richmond Fed? Well, it's through our maximum employment mandate, right? So it is the Fed has a dual mandate in monetary policy. It's maximum employment, which is not 0% unemployment. It's the level of employment that's consistent with maximum sustainable economic growth and stable prices, right? That is our mandate. So when we see structural, like sort of unexplainable immediately, sort of the employment, if we see employment data that is not easily explained, it's kind of diverging in areas, we sort of want to understand that, right? Or among populations, as well. Anyway, so, it's not like straight down, but between the most urban and the most rural categories of Virginia, there's nearly a 20 percentage point gap in the share of the population that has a job, which is what this chart is. So this is the employment to population ratio. Now, I will point out that that varies a lot, right? So on the one hand, there's so much variation. So each one of these dots is a county, and the dark blue is sort of the aggregate. So on the one hand, this just shows that we can't just make generalizations about any particular geographic region, because you have, counties that are classified as 9 that have employment to population ratios higher than those that are classified as 1. On the other hand, this is something that we can take advantage of, right? If we're trying to understand more about what is happening in communities and what helps communities to grow. So in the interest of time, I would love to talk more about this. I could talk about this forever. And this one too is sort of like a growing versus shrinking. I'm going to skip that for now because of inflation. I feel like I should talk about it. This is the consumer price index, year-over-year percent change in the consumer price index. This is not the measure of prices used most commonly by policymakers. That's the PCE. But this is sort of the headline one that shows up in the news more. In April, the headline CPI showed a 4.9% increase in prices over the year. This is down from the 9.1% high that we had last June, but this is still much higher than policymakers are comfortable with. And the core CPI showed a 5%, that's stripping out energy and food, that was a 5.5% year-over-year increase. Now, I'm going to switch to the next. I think I'm going to switch to the next slide. So there's some important dynamics within that that are relevant. So this is that year-over-year percent change in prices. So the year-over-year, so the inflation disaggregated into the categories of inflation. Right. So this green here is goods inflation, is like the goods contribution to inflation. And you can see that in 2021, a lot of the inflation that we saw was driven by goods inflation. Goods prices were going up, and we know that story, right? We had a ton of demand, and supply just could not keep up. But as we have moved through the last year, the major contributor now is services, right? It is services that is driving the inflation, and within that, it's rent, right? So rent inflation has been really high. There are some indications of moderation in rent inflation, and I think most analysts expect it to continue to moderate over 2023. But I say this because there are, again, that is going to take a little bit of time to come down, no matter what we do. So I think that the possibility of getting back to that 2% target, again, these are my views. I hope I said this in the beginning, but these are my views. Anything I say here is my views, and not those of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond or the Federal Reserve System. Sometimes I do think I should get that tattooed on my forehead just so that I don't forget to say it. I think that the chances of us actually getting back to 2% inflation this year are pretty low, but most analysts, economists are sort of anticipating, or into next year, that's when we would sort of get back. So we expect inflation to keep coming down, but maybe it takes a year or so to get back to target. And there's a lot of unknown here. Is it going to be harder to get from 4 to 2 than it was from 6 to 4? The one thing that we can take heart from is that there's no model of inflation tomorrow that does not include in expectations for inflation today, and expectations have remained, pretty grounded. The surveys that I showed you earlier, the surveys that we do here, we ask about prices. So we have ways to gauge sort of business anticipation of prices. And then of course there are ways to gauge household expectations as well. And a lot of that probably comes from this, right? So because of this inflation, the Federal Open Market Committee has seen fit to raise the target Fed funds rate by 500 basis points in the last year. I'm probably actually I'll just explain what this is. So each of these dots is a Federal Open Market Committee participant, and it is where they expect the target Fed funds rate to be, assuming that their projections for GDP growth, unemployment, and inflation come to pass. So they're not predicting where they're going to vote. They're predicting where they think the rate should be, assuming that their expectations for the real economy sort of come to pass. And as you can see, what's interesting is to look at this chart for 2023 over the course of the last year, and you just see the expectation for where the rate should be just sort of march upwards. So with that, I can probably take a couple of questions if anybody has any.
So, any questions? Lee?
I guess I'm trying to understand the target of 2% inflation because we had 2% inflation after 2008, 2009, but it seemed to me that was sustained largely by the artificially low interest rates. So now we're in a situation where we've raised interest rates in order to bring inflation back down. Is there a target interest rate that goes with 2% inflation? Maybe that's kind of where my question is heading.
No, there are a lot of ways to answer this. So let me do my best to answer it at least in one way. There are models for where the natural rate of interest is that are based not on where inflation is as much as where the real economy is. So productivity, primarily productivity, sort of economic activity. So actually most measures of the natural rate of inflation, if you look at like 2009 or 2010 to recently, our target Fed funds rate was actually below that natural rate of inflation. So we had a very, very highly accommodative monetary policy for a really long time. I mean, if you look at this, if you had asked, I started at the Fed like here, if you had asked anybody in my department if we would keep rates that low for that long, they never would have believed you. If you had told them that we were going to do that, they never would have believed you, for one thing. For another thing, if you had said that we would have had rates that low for that long and unemployment as low as it was in 2018, 2019, and no inflation, the FOMC is struggling to get inflation back up to its 2% target. I mean, again, nobody would have believed you. That relationship between unemployment and inflation was then in a place that even now, it's kind of in a place that nobody can quite believe. So I think that the calculation is less sort of, okay, we see this inflation, what should interest rates? Oh, well, it is, but it's more, it's more like, you don't set interest rates for a particular level of inflation. It's more about sort of that balance between inflation and unemployment. So presumably, as the Fed raises the target Fed funds rate, that is going to filter through the economy. Interest rates, credit is going to get tighter. Interest rates are going up. They're going to go up. They've been going up. That is going to sort of reduce demand in the economy, which we're starting to see, right? We see that in our surveys. We've seen that in some other kinds of production. The reduced demand in the economy, which is then going to bring down inflation. So that's the goal. Now, what is the law? I'm not sure that I can't remember. Probably in 3 weeks, if you ask me, I'll be able to answer this, but I can't remember where that natural sort of interest rate is right now. But I think it is somewhere below where we are. So, I have probably what's going to happen is they're going to keep raising rates, or at the very least not lower rates. I don't know. Until we see inflation come back down to that 2% target, and then start to probably lower rates some. Now, the target itself, I don't think we had an explicit inflation target until, I want to say 2000 and it was like 2008, 2009. Like, it's not that, I mean, we came out of the Greenspan era where I didn't talk about anything ever. So now there are conversations about an inflation target range. But I don't think, or moving into 3 or whatever, I don't think there is any appetite for the Federal Open Market Committee to change that now, because we said it was 2%. It is now well above 2%. They're going to get it back down to 2% before they have a conversation about having a different inflation target. Pretty convinced about that.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more questions for Sonia? If not, I'll just ask a question. So in your opinion, it seems like the slowdown's occurring, so we have a recession. We're in a recession. What do you see forward-looking coming out of a recession? Do you see first quarter next year?
So I wouldn't say we're in a recession now. Consumer spending, business spending, it's too strong to be in a recession now. Now, the definition of a recession is sort of based on data and the National Bureau of Economic Research does this. It's based on data like industrial production, like employment. They're not going to call this quarter a recession. Wait, what month are we in right now? May, June. Yeah. So I don't think we're going to call this quarter a recession. Some people are calling for, I don't know, in 6 months, or I can't predict that. A lot of people think that there's a real possibility that we come out of this without actually going into a recession, because of the strength of the labor market right now, primarily. And I think that that's a real possibility too. I also think, quite frankly, from the perspective of an American, citizen, if we're as a country seeing 0.2% growth in industrial production and employment versus 0.2% decline, is that really going to make, for some people it will matter, but is that really going to make that much of a difference in our experience of the economy? Probably not. We've been through, one of the things that I think is hard for all of us, that we've been through these 2 incredibly traumatic economic events in the last 15 years. And it's hard to think of a recession without thinking of the Great Recession, right? But we've sort of forgotten about the early 2000s or the early 1990s, where we had these kind of these recessions, but they were pretty mild, and we came out of it. So I would not even pretend to predict, quite frankly, but if we're going to be in a recession, but certainly when that would be. It's not now, but but I do feel comfortable, at least as of what I'm seeing, hearing right now, that even if we do go into a recession, say at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, that it would be pretty shallow. So we also have part of the reason that I say that is because of the data, some of the data that I just showed you. Part of it is because of what we're hearing from our businesses. We also have regional executives, people who are on the ground all the time, and community development professionals. We have an outreach team. But Renee Halsam, some of you might have come across her in your travels. So she's like our regional executive for Virginia, and she is out on the ground constantly talking to firms across the state. And so part of my saying that is also coming from sort of the outreach that I hear them doing, and what they come back with. And yeah, so I don't anticipate something very deep or something very long if we even, do sort of end up in a recession.
Good note to end on, and that's, appreciate your comments and your presentation. Sorry you're late to your 4 o'clock meeting, but we do appreciate what you presented to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy to do it.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too.
All right, let's move on to item 7 on our agenda: approval of the FY24 Commission Work Program, attachment number 1, and the action is requested to approve the program by a voice vote. Does anyone have any questions about the work program that's attached to your agenda? If there are no questions.
Do you have any idea where the regional leadership trip is gonna go?
Yeah, I asked him that once already.
We are still, Eric, Sitchow and I are still working on finalizing that, so, we've convened a lot of the chamber and economic development folks, so we should hopefully in the next month, maybe, have an announcement of what that should look like.
What time of year are you thinking about?
We're looking probably April of next year.
April next year, okay. All right, very good. Luke?
Good question about the grant writing bench. In there it says that it have contractors available for localities and locality approved organizations. What would be locality approved organizations? And would that be approved by the commission or by each locality?
So if, for example, the chamber, the chamber or the Alleghany Foundation or something like that wanted to write a grant, because sometimes some grants for, a locality doesn't qualify, you might need to be a 501c3, but there might be a community benefit. So if the Alleghany Foundation wanted to write a grant on behalf of Alleghany County or Clifton Forge, they could come to us and say, yes, this is a community benefit, this is something that our locality wants, and we would approve. So we would do that on a case-by-case basis based on the project, the grantor, and sort of the localities involved in the impact of that.
But someone at the commission would then also be approving what that organization was. So the locality would seek this organization, and the commission would be approving.
Yeah, so we would look at, is this a good candidate to be a successful grant? That would be part of that.
Good, thank you.
I guess I have a question on the Western Virginia Regional Industrial Facility Authority support.
Yes.
Is that something we've been doing on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, we basically just provide, it's an important part, but Sherry does the finances, we sit in on the meetings to convene those. So our role is very much with the bookkeeping component of that.
363 hours, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, Sherry does, that's the bulk of it is Sherry's time. She does the financial work for, the accounting for them. And then John and I sign off on the checks.
I'll move we approve, if that's the right term, the annual work program.
No more questions? If not, we have a motion to move for approval. Is there a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, and we move on to item number 8, other business. Does the commission have any other business to bring forward today, Jeremy?
We do not.
Okay. Does anyone else have something on their mind?
I want to say thank you for the Jeremy Holmes who spoke at the Commonwealth Transportation Board meeting on May 16th, that bicyclist Jeannie Duddy presented the Governor's Bike Month proclamation, and hopefully you've received that in your localities also. And then Jeremy was the program for the Roanoke Valley Kiwanis on Wednesday, so thank you very much for spreading the news about what the Regional Commission does.
Good deal. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to item 9, comments from commission members and of the public. Any comments? Anyone signed up to speak? Okay.
Well, I'll also report that Jeremy spoke at the Kiwanis Club yesterday and did an excellent job trying to explain to a group of lay people what the TPO is and does. You can imagine, there was still some confusion at the end of the program, but you did a good job.
I only had 30 minutes. It's only so much.
He used a lot of acronyms.
And we ended up talking about I-73, which is very interesting.
Well, let me just say, when you have these events, you need to pass out the evaluation sheets and deliver them to us so we can incorporate it as evaluations. He was a shy guy and didn't tell us about these 2 events, so we may have to go back and reopen this.
You give us an evaluation sheet, we'll hand them out.
Well, here, a blank sheet of paper as well. Thank you very much. Glad that you're out and about in the community. Jeremy, you're doing a good job. Thank you. There being no further questions or comments, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, sir.
Well, there's Billy Martin. How you doing? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Safe Memorial Day weekend. Let's see everybody back here next month. And don't go away, because we have some more fun for those members on the nominating committee. We'll have a short meeting.
I can keep you for 5 minutes. I know we've gone long, so I don't want to. Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Been on any bike trips?
No, I haven't.